All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming to our ClearAngel Live here. We've got really fun guests, Kenny and Phil. So I'll let them introduce themselves in a second here. But if you're not already subscribed to the This Commerce Life podcast, these are the two fearless hosts, and they talk about exactly like the podcast says. They talk about commerce once a week, and I have been listening to their podcast for, I guess since you started, three or so years now. And I think it's a really good mix of, just like founder stories. So just hearing from other founders who are in the e-commerce space. A lot of like Kenny and Phil bring so much rich historical context to like wholesale, retail. So anytime there's news happening in e-commerce, they always have a really fresh take on, what this is going to mean for the future based on a lot of stuff they've seen in the past. And Kenny and Phil are both just, I call Kenny's our grizzled commerce founder who has, anyway, I'll let you guys introduce himself. I could talk about you for hours, but I've got some questions that I sourced from the group. And then like always, once the conversation gets started, feel free to drop it into the chat and we can go from there. So I'm going to spotlight Kenny and Phil here. Yeah, let's jump right in. So Phil and Kenny, why don't you give us sort of, we'll talk about This Commerce Life closer to the end. So maybe just sort of give us a quick rundown on like a minute of your background. And Phil, why don't we start with you?
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I'm Phil. Nice to meet you guys. I'm kind of like, I think like Kenny, I'm a retail guy through and through. I grew up, so to speak, in the CPG company. So I have experience with folks like Unilever and Danone and Revlon, Kimberly-Clark, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson. And then I did some retailing as a buyer with Target and did global franchise with J&J. So kind of been all over the world working with retailers. And I did everything from like sales, trade marketing with those companies. And then I went over to startup side, worked with Hubba. I met Kent there along the way. So I did a stint in startup with Hubba and then with Nimi. And then, so now I'm a freelancer. I work for myself. I do full stack marketing, digital marketing, business consulting. And then I do some speaking on the side. The pet folks seem to like me the most. So I spend a lot of time in the pet industry, which I like as well. And then Kenny and I haven't gotten sick of each other yet. We co-host This Commerce Life and we freaking love it. It's all about success stories and retailers. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Kenny, how about you?
In a nutshell, so like Phil, I think a retail junkie is probably a good way to say it. I've been in retail for over 40 years. I started as a teenager. I've worked in like traditional retail. I've done service industry. I've picked, packed, and shipped in a warehouse. After university, I took a sales job, and then I went into London Drugs, into the stores, and then I ended up being a buyer for 16 or 17 years, and I bought all categories. I've bought most of the HABA categories. I've bought food, small appliances, toys, Femhigh, etc. I left them 5 years ago when I turned 50 to go out on my own. Now I freelance, similar to what Phil does. Most of my world sits in the CPG, but it's a lot of food-based and some health-based. I do more of my work on the operational side, trying to get people to understand costing and that side. So that's, I think, why Phil and I have such a great relationship on the podcast, even is we have strengths in both, but we definitely have strengths in areas that we have passion for. So I think we balance out quite well with that. So that's basically what I do. As I just like retail. I just like everything retail. I like companies starting up. I have my own coffee bar. I have a couple of coffee companies that I play in. I'm starting up a tea company with somebody. So we're like always doing stuff. Some works, Some doesn't work that well, and you learn.
yeah, I
But
think
that's part of life. But yeah, it's fun.
and I think as he's like, I'll kind of, I see this as me just mining you for all this information that I've been mining you for the past 3 years, and then hopefully that sparks some questions. And I'm sure we're gonna have Phil and Kenny back. We might have an experiment we do with them, where you could actually book time with them, just because I know a lot of people are gonna find this valuable. So I think like, yeah, what Kenny is, I think Kenny's superpower, if you especially when you listen to the podcast, is really helping founders break down their unit economics and really helping people understand that you either are making money, you're not making money. How do I know if I'm making money? And how do I start making money if I'm not making money? A lot of Kenny's advice tends to fall into that camp. And then I think, Phil, what I love about your background is you really bring kind of that, you've seen like the big of big. So you've been like buying at Target. So you can imagine, how many samples Phil has received in his life. And then sort of, with me on the wholesale side at Hubba. So Hubba, for those of you that don't know, we have a partnership with Fair. Hubba was what Fair was before Fair. So Fair sort of ate Hubba's lunch, for lack of a better word. So Phil and I tried to build a wholesale marketplace, and Fair kind of beat everybody to it, to be honest with you. So they figured out how to crack that nut. Okay, so I guess I wanted to just jump in. I think one of the questions that we ask everybody from the get-go, and actually, Kenny, I'm going to start with you on this one, because I remember a couple of years ago, one of the episodes, you were building this this bar. You were going to make this like nut bar that you were and you were sort of talking about it openly on the podcast, and you talked a lot about some of the mistakes that founders make in the early days. So like, if you sort of had to bucket, what's the biggest mistake when you're coaching people you see that commerce founders are making, and how can they get out of that mistake? Like, what's that one common mistake you see over and over again?
Like, when I look, to me, the most common mistake that most will make is they won't spend enough time really on the money side of it. And what I mean by that is they don't understand that if you don't price something properly from top to bottom, in terms of what your wholesale, your retail, your cost of goods, etc., and you don't layer in where you might want to go down the road, you can end up with a lot of challenges. So what I'm getting at, Kent, is that you may have a product that you make or buy for $1, and you can hop online, whether it's an Amazon platform or you can do your own web page, and you can sell it for $1.50 and make your 33 margin, or you can sell it for $2 and make a 50 margin, and you're thrilled as thrilled. But what you haven't considered is, where do you want to be potentially 2 years down the road if you want to get into retail, if you want to do promotions, if you want to do anything with anybody else. There's so many layers of costing that you need to build in at the beginning, and most people don't know that, and they don't see it. So they start off with a model that is great for that moment in time only, and they miss the fact that if they had asked, probably some, not necessarily experts, but people who get the industry, you can get ahead of it. Like, where you need to be understanding of, where you want to go is what you need to look at first, not just where you are. So this is kind of what I'd say with that.
So to scratch on that, Kenny, like what's, I know it's hard to, like, I know you do a lot in food. So like, let's pick that just as an example. Like, what's in the, is there an example of somebody, or kind of a common trope where, like you said, you're right now, sounds great, buy it for $1, sell it for $2, but then what's one thing they're not thinking of? Like you said, if they want to do retail, or if they want to, like, what's that pit that they're going to fall into that they're not thinking of? Because it does sound pretty simple. And I think, like, it's like, oh yeah, just how much does it cost to make? How much does it cost to ship? How much am I charging for? Am I making money? Like, where are you going to fall into that hole?
I think it's just how you start that, Kent, is that I tell people, as a general rule, in like, if you want to ultimately get into retail, or if you have a CPG type product, which is the world Phil and I live in, typically the rule of thumb, you take your cost of goods and multiply it by 3 or 4, that's your retail. That's how you do it. And if you can't get to that, you really need to ask yourself, am I going to make a go of this or not?
sorry, and as in like, if
you're $1 cost, you
Yep.
need to be a $2.99 to $3.99 retail.
Right.
That's where you're going to start making money. You can't just double up, because it's hard to describe it in the sense that what you may not understand is that you may need a distributor, someone to help you physically move these goods across the country or wherever you're going, right? And that could cost you 25 to 40%. You may end up getting a retailer, and you may have to pay additional fees to participate in their world, and that could be another 20%. If you don't build all that stuff in at the beginning, you're boxing yourself in. You can't move.
Right.
So if we can, sorry, I'll pick on this because I have a similar answer. Is let's take something really common, right? Let's say, Kenny, let's make a T-shirt and we're going to sell it at our local farmers market, right? So everyone kind of, a lot of founders or makers start there. They kind of go the most obvious routes where there's a market. The fall downs there that I think both of us see, right? Like, so one on the marketing side is what I would do to sell a T-shirt in that marketplace isn't what I would put on a package, isn't what I would put on a website, right? Because it's totally different. It's me, Phil. You're gonna love me. You've got my you found me charismatic. You found my story charismatic. I got 15 minutes to sell you on a T-shirt, right? I didn't count the cost of me spending 15 minutes to sell a T-shirt. I didn't count the cost of what it costs at the farmer's market. So I just sold you a $15 T-shirt and I'm good to go.
Yep.
Right. And then I think where Kenny's going is, it's great. You sold one T-shirt, but if you want to go to Target, let's say, and sell that T-shirt, or you want to, you want to sell that T-shirt at London Drugs or Walmart, right? All of a sudden, you're making 10,000, 20,000 T-shirts, and you probably can't go to every store and take 15 minutes to sell a T-shirt, right? Like, so all of a sudden, there are costs in between, like people who can deliver you for, people who can talk to Walmart for you, because believe it or not, at 15,000 T-shirts, you're tiny in Walmart's world. Yep. People who can deliver this stuff, people who can package it, the marketing you got to do that's different, right? Like, I think, right, Kenny, that's kind of where you're going.
Even the collection, Phil, like at the fair, they tapped, right? You got your payment right away. Walmart now might pay you in 60 days.
Yeah.
So it's really like what you're getting at is this, like, there's this, and just to give you context too. So when I was running my e-commerce store back in the day, I got invited onto this Commerce Life, and it was after that I actually shut my, I started the process of shutting my store down, because I think when I started applying these rules myself, I kind of realized, like, oh, wait a minute, like I'm not making money, and I'm never going to make the money that I think I'm going to make, because I hadn't factored in a lot of those different pricing. And at the time it was a side gig, and I wasn't willing to sort of go full in and make that happen. So I guess so I can summarize it, it's that there's all these hidden costs that if you're not thinking, or it's like you need to know where you want to go, because Phil, not everybody is going to get into Target. Yep. But even on things like even on Fair, like even when you're dealing with 30 or 40 doors and you're selling 50 or 60 wholesale shirts there, the same rules apply. You're dealing with a different cost structure that if you're not thinking about at the time, you're going to get surprised, and you might not actually be making.
You're gonna get closed down, Kent, is what's going to happen. Like clothing is even a funnier example. Clothing, I would say you have to be 8 to 10 times cost. Because what you have to factor into clothing is, at the end of the day, how you sell clothing right at the end is 70, 80% discounts. So at a $10 retail, if you're $3 cost, a $10 retail item with an 80% discount right at the end is you're losing money. Right. And I don't know how much you're going to have at the end. You may have more than you want. So you might wipe out your whole profits just based on markdowns if you don't think ahead. I think that's sort of what it is. People get caught up with the idea, and an idea doesn't make a business. An idea is sort of the start of it, but you got to get into the mechanics. And at the end of the day, unless you're going to be a church or a non-charitable institution, I'm assuming you want to make money, and you've got to focus on the money.
Yeah, no,
right?
That's really good. So we've got Nadia. Do you want to ask how do you price a platform or a service? Can you explain what you mean by that question? Or do you want to?
Yeah, so I'm just in the process of developing a vertical, and essentially it's a platform where people can hop onto, and it's like pre-source crowdfunding for pet care, like vet expenses. So I'm just curious, how does one price? Obviously, I know what I need to price to have sort of like the funds to fuel that side, but in terms of like my profit, how do I price like the subscription fee that they would pay to access the platform?
Yeah. So you want to think about some of those. I mean, obviously you can get kind of I'm sure the Clearco guys could probably tell you what ARR is supposed to look like and all those sorts of things from an annual revenue perspective. So you want, if you're looking for funding from founders later, you're going to want that, you know, standard to go by. And then I think you are trying to figure out, like, for you, I think it's the bigger like marketing pieces, right? So cost of acquisition, you know, what's it going to cost you to, you know, what's the lifetime value of a customer that you want? Those they're, because it's a service, you know, you're going to cover most of your costs through your margin calculations, but you got to think about forward facing, like how much will it cost you to market, right? Like, I don't
I think
know, Ken.
acquisition of
Yeah.
customer is probably
Yeah.
one of again, it's not particular an area that I typically focus on, because most of my stuff's in, even if it's in Amazon. Amazon is basically a traditional retailer. They really are. They behave exactly the same way, even though it's an online space. But I think Phil's right. I think what you need to do, Nadia, is really start looking ahead. Is what's it going to cost me to actually finally land, hold on to, and continue on with this customer?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's where your model is going to be, and I think your margins are going to have to be super fat
Yeah.
to do that, because I would assume at the beginning, especially to get people into subscription, even though we're more adapt to doing it now than we were maybe 5 years ago, it's still that, you know, what do I get? You know, how's this? And you really got to think of it. You're going to be doing a lot of talking to these people, I would assume, which means you're going to be doing a lot of work. So you really got to have
It's a
chunky
lot of
margins.
failing, actually.
Yeah,
It's a lot
chunky
of,
margins.
like, it's a really good sense of humor. Like, it's just like, you
it's
know,
the old
like,
sales, Phil.
yeah,
12 times
yeah.
on the door and you finally close.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a
Well, but
lot
now
of,
you're doing digitally, right?
yeah.
Which the myth is, hey, you know, you're going to do digitally. It's cheap, but it's not, right? Like, digital costs far more than it did a year ago.
Yeah.
It costs probably twice or 3 times what it cost 2 years ago, right? And everybody's on it. So, you know, now you've got to A/B test everything you do, but it's
That's
going to
costly
cost
though, right?
it's going to cost you a lot of money,
That's
right?
costly.
And then
Yeah, and my 2 cents on the anything with the subscription is you typically want to charge a lot more than you think. So whatever that number is, you want to go a lot higher, because you can always bring that price down. But when you're doing a subscription, it's really hard to notch that price up. Much different than when you're pricing a product.
Same mentality though, Kent, in fairness, just to
Yeah.
interrupt you, but you got to think of that even when you're doing it with a product. Once you set a retail or you establish a price, it's really tough. First off, if you get into retail, even into Amazon, if you went into Vendor Central, first off, you don't get price increases. You can't just go willy-nilly decide. You can't do that. They dictate, right? Because you can't dictate retail. So once you get locked in, if you haven't thought ahead, it's a challenge. So your subscription is the same thing. What you just said is that you got to go higher than you think you might have had to go.
Right.
Go as high as you can go before the market says, listen, you're an idiot. I'm not going to do work with you because this isn't going to work.
Right.
But you have to get to those sort of levels and then look at the margin and say, okay, do I have enough now to survive? Because you can't notch up. Notching down is easy. Everybody will take a price decrease. Nobody's taking price increases right now.
So Amy has a good question here, because this sort of rolls into where you guys help me out a lot, where if you're buying and you're reselling other brands, right? So you're using something like Fair, or you're using something like back in the day, a Hubba, you're finding something. So let's say you have like a direct to consumer line, you're also reselling other products to sort of, flesh out your assortment on your page. So Amy, I don't know if you want to come in and ask, but you're saying here, typically costs half of the MSRP to buy. You can't mark that up 3 times to customers, or they're going to go shop somewhere else. So Kenny, and like, how do you guys think about when you're buying somebody else's product and marking it up to sell in your store? How do you price that? Or what are your heuristics?
I have so many things to say about.
Yeah,
Amy.
that's
So I'm going to say this, and I don't know, actually don't know. This is one of those rare moments. I don't know if Kenny's going to agree or not. I think that when you're reselling product, you have to have a better marketing reason than anything else to why you're doing it. Like if you think of the market the way it is today, you have guys like Walmart and Amazon who are going to resell the crap out of you every day. The minute they think that what you're selling they could do better at, they're coming after you, right? Like, so everything is a race to the bottom dollar. And so like what it does is it makes every other retailer out there have to have a clear reason for being. Otherwise, you're not going to be in the game. If you look at Nike as a great example, Nike's actually started cutting out their retailers. They're starting to call them middlemen, right? And so if you are like a global shoe like Globo, if you're in the Canadian market, right? Like if you're any of these kind of like shoe houses or shoe warehouses where all they do is consolidate shoe brands, Nike has said, we don't care, right? You guys aren't compelling. You don't have any reason. I could sell to these guys. I can sell to a consumer and do just as good of a job, if not better than you. So you're out, right? So I think if you're going to buy something that somebody else is making and resell it, you have to have a really good reason for doing it. It could be, I don't know, like actually a great example, if I stay on the shoe thing, is if you're the running company, you have a really good selling prop, right? Because I know shoes, and I do know shoes better than Nike, because all I'm focused on is your running ability, right? And so I'm going to find you a shoe that is like the reason that's going to make you cut 5 minutes off your marathon time or whatever, right? Like there's a really clear reason for being, because otherwise it's really tough. Like, retailers they're shrinking for that reason, right? Because they don't have a lot of clear reasons for being.
Well,
That's
and
my opinion.
one of the pieces of advice you guys gave me, which truthfully one of the best. Sorry, I'll just keep talking about my failed e-commerce business. The blessing and the curse is that I was able to acquire a ton of customers. So I had this niche of keto and nootropic products before that was kind of a thing. And but Amy, similar to what Phil just said, like, why would you buy from me and not from Amazon? And I'd run into this all the time. I would just notice, oh, Amazon's knocking 50 cents, $1 off, and now I had better assortment, I had better selection. I really used these products. I cared about them. I could advise people. So I had some unique way that people would come to me. But really it was when I talked to Kenny and Phil, it was if I wasn't thinking about making my own product, there was really no hope for in my industry to survive as that middle retailer. So I switched my strategy and said, I'm going to get as many customers as I can, even if I'm just breaking even, so that when I launch my own product with a 70% margin, that's where I'm actually going to make my money. And like, that's how I'm going to recoup that. And I've carried that even up until now, where my list is getting smaller and smaller, but I still have 5,000 or 6,000 people that will listen to me. So when I finally do launch this product, so I think my just riffing off of what Phil just said is like, if you are in just a pure retail game, you have to be thinking of having a path to your own direct to consumer. Because if Nike's thinking about that, you have to be thinking about that too, or else you might get squeezed out of that middle as Amazon and Walmart and all that stuff start to just compete even more. Amy, did that answer your question?
Yeah,
or is that just like
it did. Yeah, so maybe it would help if I offered some context here. So I resell bike clothes for women. So my website is 100% dedicated to women. And if you know anything about the biking industry, it's very male dominated. So I think I have that advantage in that women want to support a woman-owned business. I carry a lot of brands that are designed by women, owned by women, smaller independent brands. I'm not selling like Royally Designs or Dakine or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And I do have plans to, I have done some custom jerseys. I've just had them made off the back of an existing company. I do plan on eventually making my own product line, but I'm thinking like when I think of my company and where it's moving to, I think of like backcountry.com. You know, they started out like that, selling, but and they have their own brand now as well. So they do a combination of everything, and I think they actually just opened a flagship store too. But it's like you said, if all these, you know, my biggest competitors are the brands that I carry. Right. It's not Amazon, it's not Walmart, it's actually the brands themselves. So it was interesting that you said that even a company like Nike is starting to cut out the middle stores. So yeah, so I have to get really creative here so that I can grow my brand, keep people coming back. And so, you know, the one thing that I offer is that instead of having to shop on 5 different sites, someone can come to Dirty Jane and buy everything they need in one place.
That's cool.
I think that's how you have to look at it, Amy. Is you just got to give, it's like anything today, harder, more so today than in the past. You really have to give me a compelling reason to come to you, right? In the old days, like if you're talking traditional retail would work because, you know, you went to your grocer up the street. You went to the closest drugstore to you. Like proximity was a key driver, like convenience, right? It had to be close to home, etc. I mean, as long as the store was clean, or maybe you got to know the people, you had that aspect of it. Online, I can sit at home and I can order anywhere. I don't even know where half the stuff is coming from. It could be coming from a warehouse in Tibet. It could be coming from the warehouse down the street. I have no clue, right? The reason I would go to that web page, and maybe if I go to Amy's web page, is because I know that Amy's the only one who's got a really cool selection of women's bike wear, which I can't get anywhere. Maybe I can get to Amy and talk to her, and she can advise and help. Like all that stuff is I think where today's consumer, that's value. That's not a commodity anymore, right? But to go back and answer your question, to me is the same thing. Like if you're, I guess what I would ask you is if you're buying product that people are already selling, right? And they've established retails. I think you just need to understand it in your world is I guess, you don't want to undercut them. Can you actually go over them? Can you match them and can still make money? Are you physically owning the product? You buy, selling? Like
I do a combo. I buy inventory, and then I also have a relationship with these brands so that I can carry their entire line.
Okay.
So if someone buys something that I don't have in stock, they'll ship it directly from their warehouse.
Okay. And then 2 different margin structures. One, you can run much lighter because there's nothing out of your pocket. You're not going to miss a meal if it doesn't sell. Where the other products that you physically own, you might miss a meal if it doesn't sell, right? Because you've tied up money, you know, food money in clothing that you need to, you know, it's got to move, right?
Yes,
so it's two different models of pricing. Is I think that your industry is cool.
I mark up, so I try not to go too much above the brands themselves, like maybe $5-10. But I do carry a couple brands where their wholesale price is terrible. So I price quite a bit more than them, but I'm still selling stuff. So
you're probably still selling a game because you're sort of the expert. You're the destination. Yeah, I'm going to pay more for it there than I would at the other place, but I got to chat with Amy. I got a chance to, you know, learn something. Maybe I got even upsold, and I don't mind being upsold. As long as
I got a great jersey that fits me,
right?
Not the small men's that doesn't fit me, right? So yeah,
absolutely. And if you're a woman, and let's say it's really geared to like if most of the manufacturing industry geared to men, we have different body shapes. I mean, that's kind of physiological, right? We're just different. Like if you have now stuff, right? If I'm a woman, I can go and say, oh my God, forget it. I can get stuff that's going to fit. This person's going to walk me through it. She's going to recommend things. I mean, we charge whatever you want at that point because I'm buying you now. I'm not buying so much the commodity that you're selling. I'm buying Amy. I'm buying this cool spot. So your pricing can be very different. If you're going to be a non-face of just a repository for goods, you better be competitive. Because the only reason I'm with you then at that point is probably because
price and that's not what I'm going for.
You don't want that. It's a shitty model to see volume.
As I grow, that's like my number one goal is always want to have that small feel, like one-on-one personal touch.
You can charge for that.
Yeah.
Cool. You can charge for that.
Awesome.
Thanks, Amy. So
cool industry, by the way. That's I like that. That's a cool play.
Yeah.
One of the questions I'd love to almost ask each of you to sort of kind of give your take on this, where I'm maybe more of a like like I'm normally an optimist, but I'm more of a cynic these days when I look at like I am very bullish on e-commerce only because I'm at Clearco. My job is amazing. I get to talk to founders all day, and I've seen just countless time and time again founders who are creating their own websites on Shopify, doing direct to consumer, like Amy. Maybe they have a bit of wholesale. They're reselling. They're building their own brand. All that stuff. I've seen it. I know that works. But when I think about like then moving up market to Target or to and to Target's probably the highest one, but like just getting into more and more wholesale. And maybe Phil, it's because we got burned in the wholesale game at Hubba, but I worry that it's those other retailers that are actually getting squeezed out. So like if I was starting right now, that wouldn't even be on my map of, like, if I'm doing my 5-year plan, I would not be like, oh, I really want to get this t-shirt into Target. My brain would be solely focused on direct to consumer. But I also don't understand that world as much as you guys do. So let's do this thought experiment where if you're each launching, a product. So like Phil, like I know you do a lot in pet, like you can pick pet, and Kenny, you can pick whatever one you want. But like what does that look like? Like what does that strategy look like where when does retail factor in? Are you doing it right away? Are you waiting a year? Are you waiting until some revenue milestone? Are you starting those conversations? Like, kind of talk me through, you're starting an e-commerce store today. What are you, or maybe not right away, you've got some traction, you're doing 5K a month. What does that 1 year, 2-year plan look like for your store, given everything that I don't know? Does that make sense? That question makes sense?
Yeah, but no, you almost need, I don't know, Kenny, does somebody want to volunteer a product? Because it's
a tough one to answer by that.
Yeah.
I think it's like anything. I think if your product lends to traditional retail, you need to think about it right out of the gate, because it's funny that I'm only going to do online and nobody's going to shop in stores, and online, which is really, we see that since COVID definitively has happened. Don't fool yourself. Retail is not dead. Retail is going to change. And yes, we are buying a lot online, but I don't know how you guys have managed your world, but I'm sick and tired of being in this freaking house. I've been in this house for 15 bloody months. I shit you not. I don't think I'm going to order anything online once we're allowed out. I'm going to go shopping just for the sake of shopping. I will go buy stupid things. I don't probably pay too much in a retailer just to get out of my house. I don't want to be in the house anymore. Right. So I think there's a lot of people down that side too. But I think to think of it, don't think of yourself as only in the channel you're in now. It's the same thing as a pricing idea. You need to think of where you might be. I'm never going to be in retail. Well, you don't know that. And if you start in retail, I'm never going to go online. Well, you don't know that. Plan for it. Like, you've got to get that built into the model at the beginning, because it's really hard to do once you get moving. That's what I would say to you. Just, it's hard to change pricing, etc., if it's not built in sort of, or baked in kind of at the beginning. So
there's been some questions that have popped up here, but I guess what I'm trying to scratch at, because I hear this when I'm coaching, when I'm talking to customers, like I hear this like meta, it's the same, like you when we say retail, we don't just mean, like with Kenny, when you're saying retail, you're not thinking just Target and Walmart. You mean like the stores.
Amy could have her own shop on Queen West, right? Or somewhere in Leslietown, which maybe it works really well. It's kind of funky down there. And she could have the same feel, like an omni-channel feel, where her online and her physical are same.
Okay, so let me phrase it this way. So you're seeing traction in e-commerce. You know that e-commerce is a trend that's going to continue.
Yeah.
Now, COVID, I know it throws things up, but like in a given week, you have limited time. This is always the question, right? You have a finite amount of time. You can't go hire a bunch of people. You don't have the money to go hire a bunch of people. How much of your mental mind share out of 100% are you spending, even in those early days, trying to like knock on the doors, if you will, to, using things like Fair? So I think someone asked here, like Chandra, like how do you build a new brand other than using Facebook ads? if you have a product where you can list it on something like Fair using our partnership, then you can attract, wholesalers who can come and maybe try to buy your product for their retail locations. How much of your time are you spending on that in a given week?
So maybe I think I want to try and reframe the question a little bit, because I think the thing is, like, so Kenny and I both spend a ton of time bricks and mortar, online, Amazon.com.ca, whatever you want to, so we've kind of done both sides. I think for early stage brands, I think that my reco is simply like the kind of pattern of things that we've recommended is that you have to think ahead and you have to think about where you want to be eventually. I don't think you think about that from a channel perspective, period. I think what you think about is like the things that, quite honestly, that Kenny's better at than I am, right? But you think about profit, you think about operating margin, you think about cash on hand, and then you figure out, what do I need to be bigger than I am now, and what gets me where I want to go the fastest, right? Sometimes, depending on the brands that you have, that is a simple look. Like, the cost of being online is cheaper. I don't need to worry about a retailer. I don't need to worry about, Kent, we talked to one brand from like Clearco, where they're a pet brand and they were working with a pet retailer, but his comment was, I'm selling like gangbusters online and the pet retailer's killing me, right? Like, it's just paperwork. And we're like 2 people. So he was thinking about pulling out because he could just move faster online, right? So I think you think about it in that sense. So I don't think you get fixated on, do I need to be at Amazon? Do I need to be at PetSmart? Do I need to be at Target or Walmart? I think you think about what gets me, because you all have probably scale in your, right? Like, how do I scale the fastest so I get to a number that allows me to open up and do more? Right. So I think you think about it that way, and then you back yourself up to, well, what does that mean? Does that mean I spend every moment I have, lying down in front of Walmart buyer cars until somebody takes me into their merchandise set? Or is that, what, I'm just going to list on .ca.com and sell like gangbusters? Is kind of, do you know what I mean? Like, I think that's the way you look at this. I think there's a lot of like the online bricks and mortar conversation. It's a lot of big people talking about big things with other big people, but quite honestly, don't care, right? Like, if it's not in your wallet, then we don't. We're kind of like that. I think I'm sweet, but if it's not in your wallet, we don't actually care. Like, it's gonna go in your wallet.
I think that the big takeaway will kind of, there's some questions there I'll move to, but you're right in that. Something that I don't think we even preach enough, and I'm thinking of how we can start to pull this more into our coaching curriculum here, is that we're definitely biased in, like, we have blinders on because we're a tech company, we're a startup, we just think of tech, like Kenny, the pandemic blip is going to happen, then everybody's going to go back online. And every time I talk to you, I remember that there really is, like, from the earliest days, you have to be thinking about which stores would be carrying this product. Who could I sell these to? Are they gyms in my local area? Are they, the local pet store? How do I get into that other chain? And like, you have to be thinking about those kinds of things very, very early on, much earlier than I think I would even recommend my customers to be doing. So I think that's it's more of a meta lesson. Every time I talk to you, I just learn more here. But here, let me get to some questions here. I want to start with Emma's here. This one's really interesting. So, hey, I'm in the lucky position where I have a national chain in the UK interested in my products, but I'm a one-person company at the moment. Do you have any tips on bargaining powers, given that my margins are razor thin? So, interest from a UK retailer, national chain, one person show. How does Emma, feel free to add any color here as you go as well.
Are you a food product and apparel?
What do you have? What are you doing?
Yeah. I think that matters. And then the razor,
from a high level is be careful.
Yeah, right. Razor thin margin makes
Yeah,
me-
that was that what right there kind of freaked me out a little bit.
Yeah.
So
Right.
talk about that. Why like
Is,
most people there's Emma. Hey, Emma.
Hey, Emma.
Hey, Emma.
Hi, sorry, my internet is really bad, so I might
Okay.
cut
It's okay.
out. Essentially, we're actually a sexual wellness company, so we sell sex toys and vibrators and all that kind of
Yeah.
good stuff.
Yep.
I say razor thin. I've priced it up, so obviously when we buy more units, our margins become a lot bigger. So
Right.
ideally with the retailer, they would be taking more products to allow those margins to be bigger. But obviously, yeah, bargaining power wise, I won't have very much against them. So I'm just kind of interested really in kind of if there's any tips or tactics I can use to kind of, I don't know, keep those margins wider, essentially.
Tough one because you don't own the products per se. You don't own the brands. And in the old days, there was a lot of margin in those categories. Those margins have, as the categories become more popular and more mainstream and less focused in specialty shops, and online has helped that too, the margins have got progressively tighter. Anything's doable. I wouldn't want to answer too much and get you pushed down a path where as soon as you say razor thin, I think that's where Phil and I right away, I worry because you've got a whole bunch of other costs that are going to be built in. You got to get it there. You know, I don't know how fast people are going to pay you. I don't, you got so many things in this one.
Just the deductions and the paperwork that comes with it as well.
You got exchange rate probably challenges here that,
yeah.
You know, if you work on exchange rates, just look at what's happened in our country in the last 6 months. If you are buying or selling in the States, you've had a 10 to 15% cost fluctuation by virtue of nothing you can control. It's all international exchange rates, right?
I guess the other way to think about this might be
bargaining power is tough, man.
Where do you go? So if you get into the chain, where do you go from there? Like what does it accomplish for you? So the profit margin gap is interesting. There's some math you could probably do to figure out, you know, so if you go, let's say razor thin is 5%, 10% margin, and then ordering enough mass gets you up to 30, you still need to figure out what you got to call back to hire people to help you out.
I love how you did that. I was thinking razor thin in the 30s. Because you're distributing someone else's product. You're 5 to 10s, man.
I've worked yogurt, right? So yogurt is like,
that's a different commodity.
Yogurt is like 5%. Anyway, whatever the number is, I think you figure out like, so maybe a way to think about this is after you get into the national retailer, what does that do to your long-term projection? And where do you actually want to be? So let's say you get into Asda or Tesco, one of these guys, right? You get into every door that you could possibly find in the UK. What does that mean for your business? Like, where do you want to be? Because that, you know, and does this change your trajectory at all, right? Like, does it put you in places you don't want to be?
Sure. So my direct to consumer margin is between 30 and 40%, depending on our product. But I think at current size, I think that the margin will be around 10 to 15. So you're
going to be really tight, my dear. That's going to be a challenge. Yeah. Can I buy the product from other people? I don't need to buy from you. Like, you don't have exclusivity. You don't have anything like that. I'm getting to the bargaining part of your question. So they've contacted you. That's awesome. They might have found you online, or I don't know however they found you, but can they buy the products you're selling from anybody else?
No, not my particular product, because it's direct. It's completely built, not built by us, but it's completely unique to our company. However, if they wanted to themselves build a product, they could
knock off.
But anybody can do that part, but nobody does that because it's a lot more complicated. Mm-hmm. But they can't physically go get this somewhere else. So the bargaining power you have there is that basically they're stuck with you. I would go back to the first part. In the category you're in, if this product is really yours and don't have a lot of competition per se. I mean, I know you have competition, other things might be similar to you, but this is yours. Mm-hmm. You probably should be running on fatter than 40 to 50s direct to consumer first.
Okay.
Honestly, I know I bought the category even at London, like London Drugs. I know that the margins in there can be a lot fatter because it's a different type of industry, right?
Sure.
So I think your margins are probably a little lean potentially already. But to be working on a 10 with 15 with overseas and all that, I'd really be super, super cautious. Just on exchange rates alone, you could lose it all.
And then Kenny, just to sharpen that, so 30 to 40%, we heard from Emma. What would you call a fat? And you're saying that is not a fat margin. What is a fat margin in your books?
It depends. It depends on the commodity. If if you're working on food, a 30, 40 margin might be okay. If you're working on a product like these or clothing, then 70s and 80s are better. Right. It really depends on the commodity and how much of it is truly yours. That's why I ask, like, if this retailer can go buy it somewhere else, you have limited bargaining power. Because they've contacted Emma, because this is more Emma's product, she has some leverage.
Right.
But if you're going in with a 15 to 20% play overseas, and I don't know. Unless there's massive volume, I'd be really.
And I think a good, I'll move on to another question here, but I think another good meta lesson that every time I talk to you guys, I just remember is like, even though it sounds like you're always making money, you're not making money until you actually figure out if you're making money. And it's such a simple thing to say, like, it sounds almost like, why even say that? It's so common sense, but it's like, you're absolutely right where, if you don't factor in those different costs, if you don't figure out the broker, if you don't figure out that time, you're going to lose money, and worse, you could lose a lot.
Well, you could end up losing your house. I mean, because a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, which I think most of us like here are, is you typically bet with your own money. Now you're going to go to Clearco and you're going to get money, but it's still money, right? You gotta. Right. Someone's going to have to pay this back sooner or later. Like, this is going to come out of something.
Emma, on that note, Emma, we should here. I'm going to follow up with you, because what we could actually do is we could give you an inventory. Did you have an inventory line with us?
No, not yet.
Because if we got you an inventory line, there are no personal guarantees or anything with that. So the worst case is, we'd lose the money. You wouldn't have to pay us back. Which is good.
I would sign up for
yeah,
that.
Sounds perfect for me.
Yeah,
I'd be on that one.
No. But
can we all get that, Ken?
Ken, is that open to everybody?
Kenny and I have some ideas.
Hang on. Emma, I haven't seen.
No. Let's focus on what you just said. We don't care about the rest of it.
I'm putting my lawyer hat on. Emma, I haven't seen your business. This is not. I can't promise you that.
It's not what I heard. But Emma, it's not what I heard.
I think it's recorded too, Emma.
That's not what I heard, Emma. I'm telling you, I'd be all
I'm definitely watching this
signing off on it right now. So.
I'm going to send this.
And I'd watch for the edits. Like, if there's a gap in this one, we know that it was redacted.
I just come in wearing a different shirt or something like that. No, but Emma, seriously, I'll follow up with you to see if there's something we can do there, because I know that we've had other customers where you basically even if it's like, and again, I don't know what your revenues are, but having a float where you might get more aggressive, knowing that you have even a $20,000 or $30,000 carry float that we could literally provide there as a cushion in case you made a mistake, often can help with these kind of things. So I just got it on my note here to follow up with you after this. Okay,
well, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Just to move to another question, I think this is a really good question. So who here? Buzz. Yeah. Can you who's oh, there we go. Hey, so okay. We've got, oh, here, yeah. Do you want to just ask your question? You can just ask it live.
Yeah, sure. Hey guys, I'm Buzz. So we're an LGBTQ ran custom design apparel and accessories brand. And we've started in 2016, so 2021 is our 5th year. And our product prices they've never increased. And so with our vendors, we screen print apparel. So with our screen printing, obviously those contract prices have gone up over the years, while our direct to consumer prices our retail prices have stayed the same. So I want to know, like, what's the best way to slightly raise product prices without losing longtime customers and scaring potentially new customers away?
I think first thing that, sorry, Phil,
Yeah.
I think
Go ahead.
some of the fear that people have is that they can't get a increase in price, which is a fallacy. I mean, if you watch the news right now, what's the news telling you? All they're talking about is inflation, and all they're talking about is all the prices increases that comes. So they're going to come, right? Containers from Asia were 4,000 US last year. They're 10,000 this year. You know, freight's gone through. Everything's gone up. So you can definitely get price increase, especially if you're in your world where you're maybe not dealing with mass retail. Mass retail is a different one. Hard to get a price increase in Walmart, Superstore, those places. It's really hard, if not impossible. To what you said is the transparency part is probably to some degree the best way to play it when you're talking to some of your people that are buying from you. Is listen, here's what's happened. The cost of the ink's gone up. The cost of the screens that I have to replace has gone up. The cost of shipping to you has gone up. If you show people are generally, like, seriously, I know it sounds like bullshit, but people are generally pretty good. They'll get it. I mean, you haven't had a price increase in 5 years. Here's the reasons why I need a slight price increase. Most will take it. We all walk into stores every day and we pay more than we paid last year. We don't, it's not like we stop buying things.
Right.
What people don't like is when they feel they've been gouged.
Yeah.
Which is, I thought about what I sort of trying to read into what you're saying there. I think as long as you're honest and you're basically, you don't have to spit everything out. But yeah, if you tell people, here's the facts. This is what's happened. I buy from the US. Well, it's not a good one now because our dollar got better. If it was the reverse, you know, like in the old days, because, you know, we were buying at $1.30, you're buying at $1.20 now. Well, that's a benefit to you potentially. But I would just say, just be as honest as you can. And I don't think the price increases are hard to get per se.
I think the only thing I'll add to that is from the marketing angle is sympathize, but don't apologize, right? Like you are a business, you know, again, you're not a charity, you're not a foundation, right? So you're here to make money. So I think most consumers understand that anyway. So if you say, listen, like we've just got to raise prices. Like we haven't done it for 5 years. We're moving the price up. You know, we're sorry that we've had to do this, but we're not sorry, right? Like, so and I'm also not going to open my books to you so you can figure out like, you know, where every 50 cent came from or anything like that. The only other thing I would say is, as you're in this process, I know you're talking about a slight bump, just try and make sure that you accommodate for a cushion as well, right? So that, you know, the other thing you don't want to do is kind of go, okay, I'm going up $3. And then next year you look at it and go, I missed, right? Like it should have been 450, right? So then try and get to the 450. Now you tear the Band-Aid off. And then if you can afford to hold that for a couple of years, I think consumers will appreciate that too, right? So.
And I think the other thing that Phil's sort of getting at, I would never run 5 years without a price increase, just so you know.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I would never do that. I don't think there's any problem having a price increase every year if you so choose. And it doesn't have to be, I'm not saying double up every year, you know, but if you have a 2 or 3% price increase every year, I don't think that's fundamentally wrong. Right. You're a business. This whole game is about, it's all about the money. It's about making money. Now, what you do with it, you want to donate it to the way, you don't want to have it in the house. You want to be a break even on the other side. I'm totally good with that, but it's all about the money, because without it, you can't fuel this game. Right. So you cannot be the great cause that you're going to hold it all back because I don't want to have a price increase. You've got to do it. I'll give you an example. The major vitamin company in the country has a price increase every single year at the same time, 2 to 3% guaranteed. Even for retail, it wasn't that bad. You know why? Because that pushed our retails up, which means we got an increase every year in the category, right? Yeah. So just try not to. 5 years is a gap. That's a long time without. And now, like Phil's point, you might need a 450, but you can't. It's that, you know, it's a tough one to swallow. You might have to spread it out over some time.
I'm also thinking like how, you know, what part of our business model is that our products are accessible to everybody, right? They're not exclusive. They're meant for somebody, a guy that's in college, and also a guy that's, you know, that owns his own company. So
just remember that person is probably still going to Tim's or Starbucks, and they paid 90 cents last year for the coffee. They're paying 95 this year, and they're not panicked. Again, I'm not asking you to double. But your sustainability, it depends on the profitability. And if you're out of business, then what help was I to you? Right. I mean, hopefully your customers are friends.
So
You know what I mean?
Amy and Chandra here I have the same question too. One, it's like Amy saying, hey, I wouldn't even notice the price increase as a consumer. And Kenny, I agreed. Like, I go to the store, maybe I'm a terrible consumer, but I'm like, oh, vitamin C costs $37. I don't even know what it was last time I bought it. So
Probably not.
like, I'm not the kind of person who's going to say, ah, shit, I know exactly how much this should cost. I know some people do definitely.
You know when you're
talk
being
that way.
screwed.
What's that?
You know when you're being screwed. You know when
Yeah,
it doesn't
of
feel
course,
right.
yeah.
But otherwise,
but then to Chandra's point, like, it kind of sounds like what you're saying is you would actually announce this price increase.
it depends on who this is talking to. If you're talking to suppliers, I think you're sort of obligated to. If you are a B2C, to be frank with you, I would just raise the price.
Right.
I wouldn't say anything. If someone comes back to me, I think because from what it sounds like, you might be talking to consumers that you actually know, or you've had some relationship over the last 5 years. If you're quasi friends, I think any friend deserves some reason on anything, right? I mean, that's part of this. You have probably a different relationship with your consumers. I don't think it's unfair, but I don't know if they ask you, you can be, like Phil said, you don't have to show them the books, but a high level, here's the reasons. And most people, they'll say, wow, yeah, I'm sorry, man. I wish you had done it last year.
Yeah.
Right. Because I don't want you to be out of business because I like you and I like your products. Most people are pretty good, right? I mean, seriously.
My thought it would be like a newsletter or something, right?
It could. It really depends on your customer base.
Okay.
So whoever asks, do you announce, like, for example, I think Chandra? No, like when I was in retail, I just raised prices. A lot of drugs, we didn't sit there and say, oh my God, we got to go tell people we're raising vitamin C. No, I just raised vitamin C. And then I'd watch. If everybody stopped buying vitamin C, you know what that meant? Shit, I raised it too high.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I got to raise it, or maybe I got to drop it, or, maybe I've lost this person out to another retailer. Then I got to phone marketing and say, listen, get on and do something. We need these consumers back. But otherwise, people don't really notice, to be frank with you.
And the last thing on that, Buzz, I'll check. I'm just going to leave a note here to check for you. I think there's a tricky Shopify. Are you on Shopify?
We are.
I think there's a tricky Shopify plugin where you can say, hey, here's my price is $20. I want to be at $25. And then it basically just incrementally raises your price. So that you're like slowly getting to the $25, but it feels very gradual. And if that doesn't exist, I'm going to go build this. I think I saw this, but it's but that could be another way where you're sort of like easing people into the price increase.
Well, and I could tell you, Kent, that we've done that in retail. Like if I knew, like I had retail manufacturers come with 10% increases. They had to. Oil went through the roof, shipping went through the roof, and I would tell them, listen, I can't do that, man. I can't. I can't. Listen, spread it out. You need $10. Do $3 every 4 months, right? For the next 3 times, we'll get to the 10. I'll get my retail gradually to that spot, so the consumer, doesn't get this brunt of holy moly, like it's a massive increase. You kind of just bleed into it. It'll go. It'll get there.
Yeah. Well, hey, this was sort of a fun experiment, and I'm glad we had some questions here. And I'm curious for those here, I can see all of you. Like, if we did this where we could ask Phil and Kenny more questions, give them like, would we want to do this? Like, I think I'd want to do this again. I like just getting this back and forth from my grizzled my battle.
It's such a polite way of calling us old.
Yeah, but you're so young. I mean, don't be really.
Yeah.
No. I think that it's the breadth of your experience that I think is what makes you. And you guys fight like an old, like you've been married for years.
It feels like, yeah.
So I think I really appreciate your time, and I'd love to bring you both back and make this some kind of a ritual that we can do, because I think that we just scratched the surface on what you guys can help with. So definitely, if you haven't already, I'll put it in a link when I send this out, my weekly email. You'll see it. There'll be a link to subscribe to This Commerce Life, and you can hear this fun banter every week in your ears, as I like to. And thank you all.
But it's audio only. You don't need to see these faces.
No, you won't. Yeah, you don't have to. Yeah, these are faces for radio.
But
definitely faces for podcast.
but Phil and Kenny, thank you so much for coming and
Thank
trying
you guys. You guys had some
more-
really cool
thank you.
businesses, man. Like
Yeah.
there's some really cool
Yeah, you
things
guys
out
are
there. I
doing
think
some
it's
cool
pretty
things.
yeah. Wow, good for you. That's awesome, man.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody. And we'll, I'll send this around afterwards. And yeah, they opened the door. So we're going to do it again. Maybe we'll do it end of June, early July, whenever I can lock them down again. And yeah, thank you
No, I
all
like
for
that.
coming. Thank you
That's
so
fun.
much.
Maybe we should make it conditional. If you don't give Emma her inventory, we won't come back.
Hey, I cannot without
Because that was
Listen,
definitively in this podcast.
You guys are going to get
Emma,
me in trouble here. Okay?
No,
Emma,
well,
this
too
is
late.
this is how you negotiate with a retailer. Did you see
Yeah.
what just happened there?
I
Yeah.
love
Perfect.
it.
I'll be doing this.
Yeah.
Right. Just get them. Yeah, just ask them to host a live webinar and then corner them on.
Well,
Zoom.
exactly. Well, and Kent seems to like Phil and I coming back on. So maybe Phil and I won't come back on until, Emma's inventory is sort of
I'll tell you what,
protected.
though, we definitely will. And I think, Emma, to your, I love, it's actually a great use case for our inventory product. We're always trying to find other ways we can market it. And I think it's a perfect use case. So I hope you pass the computer threshold, because we just listened to the computer. So we'll see what it says. But I'll follow up with you, Kenny and Phil. Thank you so much. Thank everyone
No,
for
thank
coming.
you. It was our pleasure.
I
I
Thanks.
really enjoyed
Yeah,
that.
it was fun. Take care,
Bye,
guys.
everyone.
Good luck,
Take
guys.
care.
It's awesome.
Okay,
Good for you.
Good luck. Bye.
Ciao.